You know, one of the great things about live broadcasting is the ability to get immediacy on a subject that you want to talk about. And now that it's Monday and we're past the perfect season parade and all of the disagreement amongst fans about whether this was proper or not and what the intentions were as far as the parade was concerned, I feel like I have enough of the arguments on both sides of the fence to conduct a Moohead Radio show as a commentary about the perfect season parade. What I will say in advance is that I hope that the people who put on the parade are prepared for more constructive criticism than what they were able to give the Haslam family by putting on this particular parade. I also hope that they handle the criticism better than the Haslam family did, which was not very well. Let's start at the very beginning. This season, as far as I could see, only two things really caused Browns fans to form an uproar, all right? Kneeling players in protest during the national anthem and an 0-16 finish. These two things were the only things that really stirred up what I would call the true emotions of the fans. And I find those two things very interesting because they're very similar. Fans who feel that their patriotic people were offended that players chose to kneel during the national anthem. And players who played on an 0-16 team felt upset and targeted by a parade. In both instances, parties decided based upon feeling a certain way that they would publicly protest and chose their means of public protest. The players chose to kneel on the sidelines during the playing of the national anthem, and the 3,000 fans who braved the cold weather out in Cleveland decided that they would choose a public demonstration to condemn the 0-16 season. So to put these two things, and we will continue to tie in these comparisons as this program goes on. And I have written out point by point, which is very unusual for me. Usually everything is off the top of my head, but there are specific points that I want to make that I hope people will take to heart and will realize that we're all in this together as fans, and that there may have been a more effective way, and there may still yet be a more effective way of handling what the Browns went through in this past football season. As for the condemnations that have followed on social media, on Twitter, it's all part of the social media game I try to stay out of as much as possible. However, the lines are definitely marked in this particular argument. And I wanted to at least share from the parade people's perspective their answers to the criticism by fans about the parade. The first one is that the parade did not specifically target players. If you followed social media, a number of the Cleveland Browns players responded on Twitter in an upset fashion about stating, in essence, that the parade was denigrating to the players, to which the response was, well, in some instances, go fuck yourself, which we, of course, don't consider an answer. In other instances, the blanket explanation was that the parade did not specifically target any players. I want to bring up this point. If I chose to legally assemble to protest Pentagon spending, the specific way in which money which was given to the military was spent on weaponry that did not function, or as far as for overpriced products that were being made by Boeing, or anything that the Pentagon did from a fiscal perspective, and if I had a couple of thousand people who went out in public and protested with me about the way the Pentagon spent their money, I'm wondering, do you think veterans would take kindly to that, even though veterans were not specifically targeted? I want you to broaden your thinking a little bit here, folks, because this is not a black and white issue. This is a human issue, and the way that human feelings are affected by things are pretty consistent. I'll give you another example. If I wanted to protest a specific case of police brutality in which unarmed person was assaulted and beaten or killed by a specific policeman, and I wanted to protest that specific action, do you think that police around the country would be happy with thousands of people protesting police brutality, even though those other police were not specifically targeted? If I were to go on the other side of the aisle and I was to protest the way that welfare was distributed in America, if I were to say that the system of welfare distribution, when we're giving money to people that rewards husbands from walking away from their wives and families so that the said family can receive more welfare benefits, if I were to criticize welfare distribution and how much welfare was being distributed, do you really think that the people who were receiving the welfare would not be upset, even though they were not specifically targeted? The truth of the matter is, any good football player sees himself as the member of a team, good, bad, or indifferent. And if you use props like caskets, if you use props like paper bags over your head, if you have denigrating signs about the team's haplessness, and you are not specific in directing that invective at the people who probably deserve it the most, you're going to end up throwing out the baby with the bathwater, and you're going to end up offending a whole lot more people than maybe you intended on. But the fact that the players were insulted by this makes perfect sense in the same context that veterans would be upset about a Pentagon protest, as police officers who were good police officers would be offended by people taking one bad cop out to the woodshed by publicly demonstrating, or that many good people who are on welfare by no fault of their own would be caught up in a maelstrom of difficulty because of a protest suggesting that welfare distribution was unfair in America. If grandstanding during the national anthem is wrong to you, I'm not going to get into a political argument, all right? We've gone over this over and over again. If you see yourself as loving the flag and loving your country, and you see yourself as a patriotic person, if grandstanding during the anthem is wrong to you, what about making a social media name for yourself by grandstanding in public with insulting props and images? Now, I understand each person believes that their particular view is the correct one. However, what I see is two incidents that are extremely similar. If you want to take the attention of America, you kneel on the sidelines during the national anthem. Was it smart? I've already said no. Do I think it was effective? I've already said no. And the reason I felt that it was ineffective is because it created a further argument. And instead of bringing people together about something, it divided them even more so. When you choose the national anthem to protest, you're going to be lumped with the guys in Mexico City and the Black Power signs of 1968 as choosing an inappropriate moment, the moment in which you win and you are representing your country, to do something that honestly isn't going to change anything in the country, but further delineate the differences between the two sides involved. And the players did that by kneeling and continuing to kneel during the national anthem. And the reason they did it is they felt it was effective in getting attention. If you wait for the end of an 0-16 season to come out and dress up in your garb, and you decide to put on masks and put up caskets and demonstrate after an 0-16 season, then you have to believe that you're going to delineate the two sides even more sharply, and you're going to hurt feelings. Well, you're going to say, we wanted to hurt Jimmy Haslam and his family's feelings. Fine. But what you did in addition is you took the men who played the game, and these men are risking their lives to play the game, folks, and you injured and humiliated them as well. Whether you intended to or not, it is human nature. The same way you were offended by the players kneeling during the national anthem, even though you specifically were not targeted. Let me ask you something else. Was 3-13 really better for you? I've been doing this show now in my 14th year. And in all of those years, there hasn't been a good one to speak of as far as the Cleveland Browns are concerned. 3-13 would be about the average record of the Cleveland Browns during this period of time. And every show I've done, every halftime show, every postgame show, questioning. I mean, I've been around so long, I remember when nobody would consider Pat Shurmur for a head coaching job, and now he's a hot commodity. I mean, everything old is new again in the NFL. The only thing that's never new is the Cleveland Browns. Post-1999, it's pathetic. We all agree with that. The results of the team, simply from a business perspective, not good enough. But the fact is that 3-13 is really no better for me than 0-16, and it's really no worse. It's just a continuation of the same old, same old. And this is where we hit our next point. There is no such thing as bad publicity when you're 0-16. Hard Knocks will be rushing to the Browns' door to show them the way into their program so that they can have the inside look at a team that's coming off an 0-16 season. If you want to go freeze your ass off in sub-zero degree temperatures to protest a hapless 0-16 team, then I would ask you the question, do you really think that the publicity that you're creating is bad for Jimmy Haslam? Oh, it might irritate his son-in-law, but I mean, I'll give you even a better example. Did anybody think that Donald Trump's Apprentice show would wind up being one of the reasons he was elected president of the United States a decade later? Anybody see that coming? Do you really think that there's such a thing as bad publicity on a program like that, which was a really crappy program in which a guy gets his rocks off by saying, you're fired? But it was entertaining for people, and they watched it. So that was good. It was entertaining. Donald Trump made millions and millions and millions of dollars by branding the Trump name based on the Apprentice program. In fact, during the course of his career, he divested of his real estate, all of the real estate stuff. He's not a player in that game anymore. What he did is he shifted his way over into Trump-branded products because The Apprentice gave him name brand recognition. And that's part of the American way. Nothing wrong with that. I'm not criticizing that. I'm simply saying that there is no such thing as bad publicity. And if you don't believe that, look at the Kardashian family. The times in which we live in, if you're really looking to make a point, parade goers, This type of bad publicity only shines a greater light on the organization, and it does not hurt them. In fact, I could make the argument that when you come back on social media and say to people, but don't worry, we'll be back watching the games next year, then Jimmy Haslam is just shaking all over with laughter because he's going to get more of your money and your product is going to stink again. Why would you do that? Why would you go out and grandstand in sub-zero degree temperatures and state for the record that when it's all over, we're all friends again anyway, and I'll go ahead and pay to see the same shit next year? You and I don't disagree, parade goers. Something needs to be done, but not this. This is more of the same of what's wrong with the country because it's image first, action later. And I want action now. And so do many other Browns fans who severely disagreed with the parade. How can we do that? Did the parade target the real problem in Cleveland? Well, we know what the real problem is. Jimmy Haslam lays at the top of an organization that hires people who are unqualified to do their jobs, and the results of the product are self-evident. What would be a better way of targeting the real problem? Oh, there's a number of them, but we don't have to go very far back in history. Try publicly lobbying the league like fans did back from 95 to 98. Remember? It isn't that long ago. And if you're too young to remember that, look it up. When the Cleveland Browns were taken from Cleveland by Art Modell and the league allowed it to happen, Cleveland Browns fans they refused to let their team die. They did not hold wakes. They did not hold public burials. They did not make a spectacle of the fact that the team was dead and gone. They fought like dogs to keep professional football in Cleveland. Has things changed that much in 20 years that we have a setback season and now we're burying the team? Well, let me tell you, the fans who saved this franchise 20 years ago by lobbying the league's offices, those people would be ashamed. Absolutely ashamed of the parade that happened this weekend. They would be absolutely ashamed because it goes absolutely against the principle of what Cleveland fandom is all about. Because we, as opposed to other teams in the country, know what it is to have football taken away from us. And if we recognize that football is important to us, why bury a team? There's more. A lot of the arguments come back, and this over and over and over again. Well, you know, the players get paid millions and we get nothing in return. Now, I don't know how many times I read that on social media this weekend, and I want to address that. First of all, why do the players' salaries always get mentioned while ownership's bottom line never gets addressed? I thought you were upset at Jimmy Haslam. And when you bark about how much money players make, never mind the fact that their lifespan is shortened an average of 20 years, that they're fighting early dementia, as well as severe injuries for which they will have no health care later on in their lives. And if you look at the cost of non-insured health care, those millions of dollars that they earn might not last all that long based on the severity of the injuries they have. If you want to attack Jimmy Haslam, I don't see anybody really attacking the bottom line of the Cleveland Browns. In fact, I see the fans saying, we'll be back next year to pay for our Sunday ticket, or we'll be back again next year freezing our ass off in a half-empty stadium. 3,000 people demonstrating doesn't represent the number of people who came to games in Cleveland, although it's getting close. The fact of the matter is more fans showed up to the Browns games than showed up to the parade. But you see, the notion of fans pay and get nothing in return. I want to ask you this, parade goers. What do you want in return? What do you want? If you're paying to watch something as a spectator, you either choose to pay and watch it, or you choose not to pay and not to watch it. You could always watch it and complain, yes. But to complain that you're not getting anything in return, I question that. Maybe some of the vivaciousness in your life is missing. Maybe some of the joy in your life is truncated by 0-16 seasons and bad football teams. Maybe you've got more invested in your football than you should have invested in your football. The bottom line is this: you get exactly what you pay for. You get 16 games. If you're fortunate enough to make the playoffs, you get 17 or 18 or 19 games. Okay? That's what you paid for. The quality of the games, I sat through decades of Indians failures in the 70s and 80s, folks. I'm 60 years old. I saw empty stadiums where less than 6,000 people in an old municipal stadium that held 80,000. Do you know what 6,000 people in old Muni Stadium look like? Holy shite. It was a ghost town. When I was 17 years old, I was a disc jockey for a radio station. I could call in, 17-year-old kid. I had press credentials. So I had free tickets waiting for me at will call. The organization was so embarrassed at how few people showed up and bought tickets to the Indians games back in the 1970s. And I'll be specific about the year. It was 1975, 76, right in there. They were so embarrassed about the team that they would let a 17-year-old kid, and I didn't work at a sports talk radio station that had a relationship with the Cleveland Indians. I worked for Win Wonderful WINW 1520 Top 40 radio, and I was a 17-year-old 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. disc jockey. And they gave me free tickets whenever I wanted them because they couldn't sell them. They were so bad. The fact of the matter is, I don't think the players were any better playing in front of 6,000 people. I don't think so. I think there was no fan interest whatsoever. People at that point just decided they weren't going to watch it because it wasn't any good. But if you were there, you got what you paid for. I got more because I didn't pay. But you got a 9-inning game and a likely loss. I don't know what you're really looking for, what validation you're looking for through your sports. To me, sports is nothing more than entertainment. That's all it is. And if you're entertained, and I don't mean just by winning, if it entertains you to lose 16 games the way that you're showing, then you did get something in return. If it gave you the drive to go out in sub-zero degree temperatures to protest it, it gave you something in return. Now, I could make the argument that maybe you are a masochistic person if you derive some kind of satisfaction, but you got something in return because it motivated you to do this. So don't say that you're paying and the players are getting everything and you're getting nothing, because you are getting something. Next, this was the fallback position. Chill out. It was all in fun. Fun was 1.5 million fans showing up in downtown Cleveland to celebrate a Cleveland Cavaliers championship. That was fun. And people didn't have to have images, props. All they had was their Cavs jerseys on, smiles on their faces, and everybody got along. There wasn't a single person on social media or in Northeast Ohio who wasn't in some way, shape, or form spiritually with the 1.5 million people who were there. It was an all-together celebration. That's what fun is. 3,000 people with caskets and paper bags over their heads feels like retribution to me, not like fun. And there's a difference. Because if you feel the need to get even because you feel shortchanged because you didn't get anything in return for your money, that's retribution. That's not fun. Let me make a final suggestion so we can get this out of the way once and for all. A smarter way to have approached this. To me, the real crux of the issue with the Cleveland Browns organization is that there's nothing but finger pointing going on within the organization. Whether Sashi Brown was pointing his finger at Hugh Jackson or Hugh Jackson was pointing his finger at Sashi Brown, or whether Hugh Jackson was pointing his finger at DeShone Kizer or at Isaiah Crowell, who anyone could have run through a hole for 59 yards. If the players were pointing fingers at the defensive coordinator because of his attitude and his coarse use of language, if the assistant coaches were arguing about strategy, the organization from top to bottom is immersed in finger pointing. That's the crux of the problem. And it's easy to get caught in the cross traffic of finger pointing. And in my estimation, this parade was nothing more than finger pointing. The very thing that is wrong with the Browns organization is wrong with the fan base that collected for this parade. It wasn't in fun. It was in frustration. And there's a difference. And finger pointing takes place in an environment where there is frustration. Frustration from Hugh Jackson because the guy he wanted in the draft, he didn't get. Frustration from the front office because Hugh Jackson wouldn't strategically do what the front office or play the guys the front office wanted him to play. And we've seen it before. We saw it with Ray Farmer. Ray Farmer texting coaches in the middle of games that cost us our offensive coordinator and our head coach. People pointing fingers in the middle of games. This is not just true of the 0-16 Cleveland Browns, but the seasons that preceded it. In the middle of games, pointing fingers. What if wars were fought that way? It really is not good. So, what do we do? Here's my suggestion. I would have promoted a no finger pointing parade, and I would have invited the players, but not management. The way to get around issues is by making a specific point and statement. We love the Cleveland Browns. We are fans of the Cleveland Browns. We support the Cleveland Browns. We will continue to support the Cleveland Browns. And we refuse to point our fingers at the men who are playing the game. And you know something? If you love your veterans in America, you're going to understand this point of view. The war strategy may be wrong. The battle plan might be wrong. Our presence in a certain part of the world might be wrong. But you've got to support the men who are trying to execute the plan as best as possible. I don't have to explain that to you. You understand. You get that. Well, then let's broaden our perspectives a little bit. When Danny Shelton said free agents weren't going to come here because of this parade, okay. He was hurt, and he probably overstated the case. 3,000 upset fans are not going to hinder the free agency process more than 1 in 31 over the last 2 years and finger pointing within the organization. I get that. However, a no finger pointing parade makes sense to me. It gives the fans a chance to bond with the players. It makes the players feel wanted and motivated in Cleveland, like fans are willing to get together with the players. It puts a human face on the players. Now, if the players refuse to come to a parade like that, well, then maybe you'd want to criticize them, okay? But not until you've given them a chance. It is a positive, constructive statement. We love the team. We support the team, but we do not support management. We do not support finger pointing. If everybody could get on the same page, the organization would win more football games. And then if we win more football games, we'll be able to build more respect around the league. We won't get many bad calls during games, or as many bad calls during games. More people will want to come to Cleveland to play when they see that the fan base embraces players. You know, the Chicago Cubs back in my day never won a damn thing, yet Wrigley Field was sold out all the time. And the players loved the fans, and the fans loved the players because it was just a love fest. And the White Sox could be across town in Comiskey Park with nobody in the stands, and Wrigley, the losing Cubs, packed out every time. And with daytime baseball, no nighttime baseball back then in Chicago Wrigley Field, only daytime baseball. And they still sold the place out because the fans loved the team and the team loved the fans. And the outcome, were the fans getting their money's worth? Yeah. They were watching a baseball game in a traditional setting, and it was for the love of the team and the love of the game that they attended. It wasn't just about the outcome. That's what I would do with the parade. You'd have gotten more than 3,000 people there too. You would have had more time to create it because you wanted to put on a parade way too quickly because anger and frustration dissipates. Retributional feelings dissipate over time. It would be very hard to drum up support in March for an 0-16 parade because by then all of the anger has been replaced by who are we going to get in the draft. The only capitalization, as far as the perfect season parade was concerned, was in its timing to take advantage of the anger of people. And that's not healthy. If you held this in the spring and you gave it time to matriculate, if you gave people the opportunity to know what a positive event it was going to be and to get the players involved, players would show up. And it would create a bond between some of these good young players, and we do have some good young players. Christian Kirksey and Emmanuel Agba, two men who were singled out because they were hurt and reacted on Twitter, are both good football players. And they are football players that would be playing on rosters of other National Football League teams, okay? We're not talking about people who are going to be here today, gone tomorrow. These are people who are effective National Football League players. And there are more on the team than that. The fact of the matter is, it would give the fans an opportunity to express some degree of thanks to the players. Thank you for your service. You know, the players aren't happy about being 0-16, and they're certainly not happy in a locker room where everybody's pointing fingers above them. Getting benched, watching players play even though they're not even trying on the field. Just a feeling of being lost. If we replace some of the anger with compassion, then maybe the players would understand that playing in Cleveland was a good thing, and maybe they wouldn't be so defensive about all this. And I admit the players overreacted, but they're sensitive because they're professionals. They were hurt by their own season. They were ashamed. Don't you understand that? They weren't happy. It wasn't like, oh, I get to cash my paycheck now. It's like, no, they live in Cleveland. They read the news every day. Every day they walk out of their houses and some jackass is going to go, hey, perfect season. They live this nightmare every day of their lives. If you want things to get better, be constructive and make them better. That's not really hard to figure out, is it? I hope everybody understands where I'm coming from on this, and I wanted to thank you for taking the time to listen to this commentary. Think about it. Make your comments on the video. I'm more than happy to respond in any way that I can because I always respond to everything as close to real time as I humanly can. And I'll be putting the link up on YouTube so that you'll be able to as well make your comments about that. And you know something, after 14 years of not being paid doing this, I can guarantee you that I'm not doing this for publicity. I'm not doing this to make a name for myself. But I will tell you something that's interesting. After 14 years of doing halftime and postgame shows, these shows were the most watched in the history of the program during an 0-16 season, because the fan interest is there. And I get that the frustration is there. I understand that. We're all frustrated. We all wanted the team to do a whole lot better than that. But I'm not trying to capitalize on this. I want the team to get better, and I want the players to understand that they're the guys who have to help make it better. Afford to be pointing fingers at them and them pointing fingers at us. We're on the same team. Thanks a lot for tuning in and watching. I'll be talking to you again soon. Until then, hasta la vista, Pasture Heads. Have a great Monday.